Alright guys, you saw the title from else video. In this video, in chess, I'm going to be explaining the value of the king. A piece that basically has no value in the game, because if you lose it, the game ends instantly, but we're going to try to get an idea of what its value would be if we didn't have to lose the game while losing it. Or just in general. And yeah guys, let's just begin. But before I begin guys, if you're interested, please drop a like and subs. That would really help the channel a ton. If you're really interested, you can also drop a super thanks. By the way guys, you can also turn on the captions if I'm speaking too fast. And yeah, let's just begin. Okay, so this video is going to be split into 3 parts. We're going to explain the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And we're going to try to get an idea of the king's value. So let's start off with the opening. Now usually this is just how the opening goes, maybe something like this, for example. And in a situation like this, although we can technically bring our king, as you can see, that would not be the best decision ever, because, yeah, the evaluation kind of shows it. And let's just say our opponent keeps developing. If we keep bringing our king for an attack, then the opponent is going to just slowly develop. Wait, sorry. The opponent will literally just slowly develop. And now our king is just in a very bad position. So, as we can tell from this, it's clearly a bad idea to bring out the king in the opening. I think everybody generally knows this. Now, let's just go back to our normal starting position again. And the reason, although I believe it's quite clear, is because, simply, in the opening, there are tons of pieces, and your opponent can easily just attack your king. So, to be honest, in the opening, the king is arguably worse than the pawn, because at least the pawn, you can actually attack safely and maybe get some trades or even captures. But with the king, if you just put the king into this unnecessary danger, it's very likely you're just going to lose the game immediately, or even if you do survive, by the middle game you'll probably end up checkmated, or just in a position that there's no way to win. So, for the start, let's give the king a value of maybe 1.25. Maybe a number like that. Although, to be fair, that would be higher than the pawn, and to be fair, you can't really use the king in the opening, because otherwise you kind of just are guaranteed to lose the game. So it really just depends at one point in the opening, but definitely not in the beginning. In the beginning, it's definitely worse than a pawn. So let's continue the game pretty much. Maybe a situation like this. And now the situation's opening is kind of over. So let's say our opponent plays something like this. A mistake, because you can just play this for example. Now the opponent moves. Now the thing is, in this position obviously you're winning, but let's just move aside from that, and let's say our opponent does not make this mistake. Let's say, for example, instead they decide to play something like this. Which is still not a great move because, well, yeah, it loses a pawn, but let's just say theoretically. Okay, so the thing is, now in the middle part of the opening, still you should not bring out the king. You should 100% just develop your pieces. And for example, let's say, oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, let's just say our opponent did not make that move. Let's just say they made a move like this, for example. And now it's their turn. Let's say instead they just play something like this, for example. Now in this position, 100% castle. Immediately. And it's pretty clear why. In the opening, you really need to keep your king safe. And by the way, a little bit of additional advice for beginners. Generally, you always want to leave one square open for your king, so your opponent can't just checkmate you at the back rank. But yeah, just a little bit of advice. So generally, still in the opening 100%, you should not bring out your king under any circumstances. So let's say, for example, we just continue, the usual. Let's say we go over here. Then we have a trade, for example, and now black is actually losing by a lot. Let's say we have... Wait. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Okay. So now, let's say we have this position. Now, it may look like a normal position, but the reason white is winning is actually quite clear. There's literally no way for black to really develop any of their pieces at the same rate as white. But let's ignore all of this. Let's just continue with the king. So still, 100% obviously you don't want to bring out the king, and let's just say, oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, so let's say now that our opponent plays something like this. And you play something like this. Now we have a trade, and now the game is pretty much equal again, since the most powerful pieces are gone. So let's say, oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, so now the game is essentially equal, to be honest. And let's say our opponent plays something like... I swear, this is really annoying. Anyways, okay, let's say our opponent plays something like this. Now, I mean, it's still the middle game, and in the middle game, still, you generally don't want to bring out your king, unless, for example, let's just say you're in a different position, like, let's say, trust me, I have a plan. Like, for example, let's say all the rooks are over here, and the king is over here, and you want to defend the pawns. You can play something like this, for example, just to make sure that black can't even come near them. And now you've made sure that black can't launch any attack. And although this is usually an endgame, sometimes there can be other pieces that would make it not an endgame. Like, for example, let's say we have a piece like over here, and we have other pawns. Let me just place one over here. And yeah, now in this position, it will be essentially a draw. And this is still technically a middle game. Now, in this position, it largely depends on, like, how the game is going, pretty much. Largely, like, in the middle game, as to whether the king is really a valuable piece or not. Like, in a situation like this, probably you would use the king. So it's not a bad situation. So yeah, I'd give the king in this situation probably maybe like a 2, maybe a 3. By the way, if we actually do a calculation, for example, let's bring the king to the center of the board. The king can move quite a lot of squares, as we can see, and they can move even more on their second turn. The king can move almost as many squares as a knight can on their second turn, and a bishop. However, the difference with the king and, for example, a knight or a bishop is the fact that while the knight can't move very far and can only move in an L shape, it can jump over other pieces, which gives it an advantage. And while the bishop is literally just trapped to one color of the board, it can move immediately. So, for example, let's say there's a pawn about to promote. There is absolutely no way this king is going to stop it. So let's put the king over here, for example. Yeah, oh, whoops. There's absolutely no way the white king is going to stop it. Although now you could bring the knight or the bishop. What you could probably do... Oh, whoops. Sorry. What you could do is I could just bring the bishop or the knight, although probably in this position the knight, and once again, the game is a little glitchy. Okay. You bring it over here, and you absolutely prevent this pawn from promoting. That's pretty much the whole point. And yeah, the reason Stockfish is actually putting it at plus 72 is because technically you can checkmate with a knight and a bishop. Although I'm pretty sure even some grandmasters don't know how to do it. So yeah, the position is essentially equal. Let's be honest. And yeah, this is a situation in which the other pieces, like the bishop and the knight, are better than the king. Because although the king can move almost the same amount of squares and isn't like trapped in a specific moving pattern, the king can pretty much just move anywhere. They're kind of like a queen, but just very nerfed, pretty much. The problem for the king is that he can't go nearly as fast, and he doesn't have any like special ability like the knight jumping over pieces. And now let's move to the end game. The end game. Let's make it, for example, like this, maybe. No, let's try and make it a little more fair. Okay, like this. So the thing is, obviously, with the kings now, in the end game, like the general strategy is that you have to bring out your king since it's usually just the last piece that can like move besides the pawns. So, like for example, black moves their king over here, white moves over here, and oh, oops, sorry. Let's say for example now black makes this move, white has to go over here, and this move, and now white's goal is to simply just try to stop the pawns. That's pretty much it. And maybe try to promote their own while also making sure these pawns don't like destroy them. Because if you do leave the pawns for this, then yeah, there's pretty much no way you're going to win. This is just a hypothetical situation. And in the end game, the knight, well no, not the knight, the king will probably be, as a piece, maybe rated like 4 points. So overall, what rating can we ultimately give the king? By the way, if anybody's wondering, Stockfish evaluates the king as 200 points. If you're wondering why the developers of chess.com did this, it's because they want to make sure that like when the engine Stockfish is searching for like a way to defeat the opponent, it ignores capturing all other pieces than the king. So like for example, the entire board, all of this, it's worth 39 points. So obviously, Stockfish, the reason the king was put at 200 is so all the pieces Stockfish is willing to sacrifice to get to the king. That's why, pretty much. And yeah, that's also just, you can know that little detail, I guess. But that doesn't change the fact that still the king is just uncapturable, and there is technically no set value for the king. So now, what can we finally give as a final judgment of the value of the king in chess? The final judgment I have, personally, you can comment down below what's your personal opinion on the value of the king, is that in the opening, the king is arguably the worst piece, because if it's captured instantly you lose, and there's absolutely no need to bring out the king early. Or for example, now in the mid game, it kind of depends on your situation. Like for example, if there are tons of pieces, like there are queens and there's like another bishop and a rook, then absolutely bringing out the king is not a great idea at all. But like for example, if it's just like a bishop and a rook and you need to defend your pawns, then at that point maybe the king will be like a 2, because the king is still very vulnerable to an attack. But you can probably manage against it, and you kind of do need the king at this point to defend other pieces, while your like other pieces like rooks, knights, bishops, etc. Are constantly trying to stop a pawn from promoting or attacking your opponent's pieces. And in the end game, ultimately, I believe the king is arguably better than a knight or a bishop, because the bishop can technically stop the path of like any attacking piece, or for example, any promoting pawn. The king is the only one who could stop a piece from moving, like a pawn, for example, and actually be able to capture it back and can actually defend squares from the opponent's king. So ultimately, in the opening, in my opinion, it's 0.75 in the opening. Like maybe like 1/2, depending on your situation in the mid game, and in the ending, which is like the end game. Sorry, I'm just forgetting a few words. In the end game, probably I give it like a 4. Because to be honest, the rook could probably perform a lot better. But the king would arguably perform better than the knight and the bishop, given the right circumstances, and not that the king is just on the other side of the board. So yeah, my ultimate opinion is that, honestly, the king is probably, in total, just depending on your situation, like in general, probably just a 2. So yeah, not very good, because you constantly have to defend them. But at the same time, they can be useful in your situation, like depending on what it is. And yeah, this is the whole video. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and a sub. That would really help the channel a ton. If you really enjoyed this video, you can also drop a like and a sub. And also a super thanks. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye!